Being selfish is your secret to success. However you define success, being selfish is your secret to getting there. And I know that that probably is like, whoa, hold on. Slow your roll. Nicole and Andrea, slow your roll, or Nicole, since I'm the one that said it. But this is an interesting quote that I read this morning to Andrea after listening to an Alan Watts segment. Alan Watts is a British philosopher. And I heard something that he said that really stood out to me. And Andrea and I have been discussing it and thought this might be a great discussion to have here, because if you're here with us, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So here's where the quote came from. If you are not selfish enough to keep yourself in tune, you have nothing to offer the world but noise. To be in tune is to move as the river moves, not forcing, not holding back, but flowing in the shape of your own bed. It is the oak growing from its own roots instead of straining to be a pine. It is living from the center instead of chasing the edges. When you are selfish enough to care for the ease of your own being, you are selfish for everyone. Your tune carries into every room you enter, just as a single string in tune will send others vibrating without effort. This kind of selfishness is not turning your back on the world. It is being so much yourself that the world is nourished by your presence. What you give is not something you've manufactured. It is simply the overflow of being at home in your own skin. That's just a small clip, a small part of what I listened to, but it brought up a lot of thoughts in my own mind. And then when Andrea and I were chatting, she was looking through some things over the weekend, and that quote made a connection for her.
Yeah, I was looking through, as getting ready to move in the next few weeks. I was looking through some old documents from my former employer. And if anyone on this channel knows me, they know if I do things, I'm all in or all out. I do things at a very high level. And in my performance report, I had 2s and 3s. 3s is solid performance meets expectation, or 2 is sometimes meets expectation. And what I felt like when Nicole read that quote is, if I was truly in alignment in what I wanted to do in my life, back then my passion was supporting people through fitness, it wasn't through finance, that I would have been getting 5s across the board. So Nicole has a different insight to this quote as well. And as I share mine, it was when I heard everything Nicole said is, am I putting myself first? What I want, what I need, how I want to live my life, what makes me happy, what I'm passionate about. I wasn't passionate about finance. I had a really good job because I went to college, graduated with finance, white picket fence, have a 401k, make your parents happy. Love you, mom and dad, if you're watching. But it wasn't truly my passion. So if I was putting myself first and my passion first, it would have been an entrepreneur. And my performance reviews, now that I work for myself, I would like to say I get a bunch of all 5s. But I should have been more selfish back then. Because then I would have been in alignment, and work wouldn't have felt so hard. There wouldn't have been so much drama, so much politics. I just would have been living in my element. And in order to live in your element, you have to put yourself first, because if your cup is not filled, you can't pour to others. And my cup was fake filled. It wasn't really filled. I was doing a job because that's what we were supposed to do after college, but it wasn't feeding my soul. And if you're doing things that aren't feeding your soul, Nicole and I talk about this all the time, it feels hard. Work feels hard. When you're in alignment and you're feeding yourself first, you're doing what you love, it feels easy. And when stuff feels hard and it feels forced, conversations, sales, anything work related feels hard, and it feels inauthentic, and people can see through that. Nicole, how did the quote hit you?
It hit me in all kinds of ways, and it hit me pretty hard. I think one of the things that I believe is a big misconception about what selfishness is, and something that Alan Watts said, was you're not committing some moral crime by taking care of yourself. And it's not about you treating others poorly. It's about you having the utmost respect for yourself and your needs and your desires and whatever it is. Like, what did he say? when you are selfish enough to care for the ease of your own being, you are selfish for everyone, because when you're in a state of suffering, you're naturally self-obsessed. So in any level, you're hungry, you're tired, you're whatever. And I'm not saying we can go through life perfectly and never be hungry and never not be tired and never whatever. But when you're mindful of what your needs are as a human being, you actually are able to show up for people more powerfully. One of my other favorite teachers is Abraham Hicks, and they say you can't get hungry enough to help hungry people. You can't get mad enough to help mad people. You can't get sick enough to help sick people. And when we are mindful of what our needs are, it's not a moral crime. And quite often, people who are accusing us of being selfish in whatever way that they're, that we're being accused of, I think we have to be selfish enough to not care what somebody else says, especially when it's wrong about us. But what they're actually doing is they're asking you to be less selfish because they're being selfish. It's like, do what I want you to do instead of what you know is best for you. But I love your story, because I think that there's a need sometimes when we've become so committed to the path, whether it's our path or not. We become so committed to the responsible path, the path that we know others expect of us, the path that we feel is the right, whatever right means, the right path, that sometimes we can't see for ourselves that we've gone so far astray. And it feels really good to be responsible, to meet others' expectations, but it doesn't feel good at the same time because we're abandoning ourselves. And another quote that I love was said by one of my coaches, Gina. She said, the darkest place in a woman's life is self-abandonment. And I think that we've all, it doesn't have to be gender specific, the darkest place in a human's life is self-abandonment. Today happens to be the 2-week, the 5-year anniversary of my 2-week notice. So I, 5 years ago, put in my 2 weeks notice at my corporate company. And I remember that it's the 5-year anniversary because at the time, my coach that I was in my coaching program with, she called it Nicole Kramer Day. It was like a big deal. I finally chose myself. That's really what it came down to. I finally chose myself. I finally said, okay, I'm going to give my 2 weeks notice. I'm going to get out of this corporate job and I'm going to go choose entrepreneurship, right? Like Andrea said, she's like, I didn't realize that I really all along wanted to be an entrepreneur. Well, if we were to back up a couple months before that, I actually went to my manager. She's amazing. She's incredible. And I really thought that she was going to be there for me in that moment. And she was, but not in the way I wanted her to be. I said, my heart's not in it. Andrea mentioned, like, when your heart's not in it, like, you got to own up to that. Right. And I told her, I said, my heart's not in this anymore. And she said, but you're Nicole Kramer. And I said, it's not going to work on me. My heart's not in it. And she said, well, then I guess you're going to have to make a decision about what you're going to do, because I'm not going to let you go. I wanted her to make it easy on me. I wanted her to hear me in that moment and say, you know what, I'll let you go. And I mean, it was in an interesting time in the world, right? COVID and furloughs and things like that were happening. I wanted somebody to make the decision for me. And it took me another month and a half before I finally had the courage to do it. And I finally was willing to give my 2 weeks notice. I am so grateful that is how she handled that. And she was an even better leader for me by doing that in that way, because I did have to choose myself. And I think a lot of times too, being selfish means it's not like you're laying on the couch eating bonbons. I don't think that should actually be the definition of selfishness in our mind. It's, do you have the courage to choose yourself? And I think sometimes some of the best gifts that we are given are uncomfortable situations, like Andrea's that she described, right? A performance review. Mine, where somebody put it back on me. I was like, please, please, please let me go. She said, no, you're going to have to choose what you want to do. And I'm so proud that I did end up doing it. And I think that that's one of the most challenging things. But the very beginning of that quote, Andrea, you asked what really hit me. If you are not selfish enough to keep yourself in tune, you have nothing to offer the world but noise.
And I love that, Nicole. Neil Swindle has a question. I like the question. How do you balance being selfish with maintaining good professional relationships, especially when people depend on your time and energy? I always worry about everyone else too much. Now, I'm going to let Nicole answer this question, and I would like to answer it as well because it's something that I learned this past weekend when I was with my husband, who's an amazing leader, Nicole. Because I'm an empath, I worry about everyone and everything too much of the time, and I've learned to curtail that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, Nicole, do you want to answer that first?
To me, it ties back into, and it's such a great question, Neil. Thank you for saying that, for commenting on it, because I don't think that there's anybody that ever doesn't have those concerns, right? Especially when we are in a role where how we show up does impact other people. I think what comes through for me again and again is, if you are not taking care of yourself, you don't have anything to give, and you are a depleted version of yourself. And the very last line in this quote from Alan Watts that I read is, what you give is not something you've manufactured. It's simply the overflow of being at home in your own skin. And I think when we really are fully supported, fully resourced, fully taken care of, in terms of, we've been mindful of getting enough water during the day. We've been mindful of stopping and eating a meal that our body needs in order to keep going. We're mindful of making time for joy. Like, Andrea just got back from a vacation, and that was one of the things we were catching up about this morning. She's like, yeah, I feel a renewed sense. I shouldn't be speaking for her. She's right here, but it was so nice for me to hear. She's like, I feel a renewed sense of like how I'm approaching things. And it just feels really good, that I took a break. And so I think that the way that we treat ourselves, the way that we respect ourselves, actually is the best benefit that we can give to other people, because it's the example. People don't do what you say, they do what you do. And you teach other people how to treat you. And so they're going to be able to get more from you and experience the best version of you if you are putting yourself first. And I think it can be reinforced in corporate environments that, like, the sooner you get back to a text or an email, the better employee you are. Or, I remember I used to have anxiety around a lot of that stuff. Like, I've got to get back to somebody right away because then I'm the best version of me that I can be. And it just left me feeling really depleted and really overwhelmed by trying to keep up with that in every area of my life. And I think the number one thing we can do is remember that we're not being selfish, like we're taking something away from anybody else. We're being selfish so that we can give the best version of ourselves to everybody else. And that text can wait. The email can wait. The conversation, like, there was a conversation I told Andrea about this morning. I was like, yeah, I should have had it last week. I traveled to go to my uncle's funeral, so I had less time last week than I wanted to. And she said, he's still there. Reach out to him today. Like, nobody went anywhere. Nobody, and if it did change, if a couple days changed a professional relationship from somebody being interested in something to not being interested, was it ever really real to begin with? So I think, I don't know, that's how I would at least start to answer it, Neil, is what are you giving to others if you aren't giving the best version of yourself? And again, it's not just sitting on the couch eating bonbons. I don't think that's necessarily, not that you said that, Neil, but I think being selfish might, I'll just offer this because I know Andrea has some good answers to this as well. I would invite you and myself and anyone listening to define selfish differently. Like, I think it has a bad rap. And I think selfish, maybe if we look at it differently, it's like how people have started to define success differently. Does success look like big houses and big cars and lots of money? Or does it look like quality time with the ones that you love and living life on your terms? And I think the sooner that we can create a definition that serves us, the better. And I would say the same thing with selfishness. So what does that look like for you so that you can show up as the best version of you?
Good point, Nicole. Now, Neil, I know we're not friends yet. And this is going to be an interesting perspective because someone who loves me endlessly, because he's my husband, said this to me. He had said, well,
did we lose you, Andrea?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Can you still see me?
Now, yes, you're back.
Because my husband who loves me said this to me. He goes, when you are responsive and you're answering everyone's question, you like being the go-to. You like being needed. And how are people ever going to grow for themselves? And you'll think about leadership perspective. How are they going to grow for themselves if you're always there for them and you're always responding, you're always available? So when we were on vacation this week, there are some things that came my way. And my husband said, let them figure it out themselves. And it pained me, Neil, to not respond on my texts and my emails, to let people figure it out themselves. And guess what, Neil? They figure it out themselves. And when people figure out themselves, they can grow as individuals, they can grow as leaders, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. So are you being selfish? Because remember, I'm not saying this to you. I'm saying this because my husband said to me, am I being selfish because I like being needed? And that's really about me. And could I be more selfless if I allowed other people to go through the muck to figure things out and to grow and to do critical thinking on their own and to like really like do that problem solving? Because that feels, even though it feels selfish, we're sitting there when we have the answer, right? Could it be more selfless? Could we ask them a really good question so they can figure it out? Where oftentimes we want to help solve people's problems because we're their coworkers or their leaders. So I'm interested to hear, if you respond on Nicole's LinkedIn, what you think of that perspective, because it was brought to me from someone who loves me the most, and that would be my husband. And he was right. He's always right. It just takes me about 4 or 5 years to get on board.
Well, and I think you can also, I love that he made that point, and I love that you're seeing it that way, because that is the truth. It's like, I've said this before, Andrea, there's no act that we ever have that isn't because we get something out of it. There's no action that we ever take that's completely selfless. It's just, even if you're like, but I really like helping people. I really like volunteering. Who really likes volunteering? What do you really like? Right? It always comes back to something that, because what's our third cornerstone? People do things for their reasons, not yours. But I also think you could, like, if I were to also respond to what Neil said about professional relationships, I remember many years ago when I was in my full-time job and also in my full-time entrepreneurship, and I was burning the candle at both ends. I was like, I cannot be in all of these multiple conversations. So I figured out a way that I could still create rapport and build relationships, that I didn't have to do it in a way that it had always been done. And I teach it to audiences now. It has to do with a lighthouse. And it was a great way for me to show up so that I was still able to take care of my own needs and wasn't feeling overwhelmed by keeping up with whatever, whether it's professional relationships or social circles. How could you do it in a way that does honor what your needs are? And then also, like Andrea said, you're not helping anybody if you're always coming to their rescue, because how do they then know how to take care of themselves?
Exactly.
So I guess
I was going to say, with all this being said, is if you're being selfish, it leads to you showing up better at the most important moments that matter in your life, which are the moments and the conversations with people you care about, or professional relationships, like Neil said. Nicole, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, but did you want to add?
Yeah, I think just redefining selfishness is really a big opportunity, and that's my invite. You're welcome, Neil. I'm glad that was helpful. I think, again, the part that really stood out to me is like, being selfish is not a moral crime. You're not hurting people. So can you redefine it? And if you were here listening and something stood out to you, please comment. Thoughts grow stronger when shared. Let us know if you were here live or if you were here on the replay. We'd love to hear your input on what I believe is a very important conversation around how to show up holistically in our lives, regardless of what area it is, so that we are showing up as the best version of ourselves.
Awesome.
All right. And the good news is, we would love to read your comments if you leave any there. And if you want to what's going on in our world, we do have a wait list for upcoming events. And Andrea, if you don't have it, I can go ahead and put it in the
I do not have it. Can you put in the chat for me?
Yep. I put it in the chat, so that'll show up if you want to find out what we have going on in the world of Exactly What to Say. Because we started this by saying, if you're not taking care of yourself, then you've got nothing to offer the world but noise. And what we teach in our Exactly What to Say curriculum is your words are either helping or hurting. And your words are really important to how you show up and the level of impact that you're able to make. So if you are ready to dive in deeper to having your words work for you and having more influence in your life, sign up for our wait list, and we will make sure that you get to know what's coming up.
Awesome.
All right. Any final thoughts, Andrea?
No, you nailed it.
Awesome. All right. Well, we look forward to reading comments. If you were here, tell us what your thoughts are around selfishness, and we'll see you all real soon. Hi, I'm Nicole Kramer.
And I'm Andrea Ferry Daniels.
And we are Exactly What to Say certified guides. And we are so thrilled to announce that we are coming back with an incredible program for you called Exactly What to Say. And the people that are perfect for this opportunity are professionals in their industry that are looking to up-level how they show up to the critical moments that matter in their life.
If you're interested in this program, the link is in the comments below, or feel free to reach out to Nicole or I directly through Instagram or phone call.
We'd love to see you there.